Payroll earnings in CenterPoint allow you to describe the different ways that your employees are paid. We can maintain a list of earnings underneath Setup, Payroll Details, and Earnings. When you get to this list, it might already be populated with a list of earnings. That'll depend on the way that you started your new database. If you started your new database using the new database setup wizard and the payroll setup wizard, then you might have a list of earnings similar to the ones that you see on my screen. If you started your new database by converting from one of our legacy products, then the earnings that you see on the list might be the earnings from that product. If you want to edit one of those earnings so that you can make changes to it to meet the needs of the earning that you need for your database, you can highlight it and click the Edit button, or you can double click on it. Both will take you into an Earnings Detail tab that allow you to make whatever changes you need to that earning to adapt it for your needs, and then click Save to save it, or Cancel to cancel any of the changes. You can delete any of the earnings that are on the list by highlighting the earning and clicking the Delete button, confirming that you want to delete it, and then it'll either delete it or give you a message such as the one you see on my screen saying that it can't delete it. If it can't delete it, it might mean that it has already been assigned to the employer or the employer and employees. To delete it or to remove it from the employer, I can go to the employer setup record by going to Setup in Payroll Details and Employers. I could edit the employer and go to the Earnings tab. At the bottom left of the screen, you're going to see a list of all the earnings in the database. If it has a check mark next to it, it means it's already been added to this employer. So to remove it, I just need to take the check mark out. So I'll take the check mark out and confirm that I want to do that. And if it doesn't let me do it, then it's been assigned to employees and I have to remove it from the employees first before I can remove it from the employer. Okay, if it allowed me to remove it and I want to save that change, I click Save, and then I can close the employer setup. And now that I have removed it from the employer, I should be able to delete the earning here, which it allow me to delete that earning. I can also, one way to start a new earning, there's a couple different ways to start a new earning. I could either click on the New button, or I could find an earning on my list that's similar to the earning that I want to create and click the Copy button. That'll copy all the details from the earning that I said I wanted to copy into a new earning so that I could create a new earning. Now I just need to change the abbreviation, maybe the name of it, and any other details such as the expense account that I might need to change, and click Save to create that new earning. I, however, am going to create a new earning by clicking the New button, and that's going to take us into an earnings detail. The earning that I'm going to create is another hourly pay type of earning. I already have one on the list, and you might have earnings of the same method, multiple earnings of the same method. So I might have multiple hourly pays. One reason for wanting to do that is to have a different default expense account. Another reason might be simply to have a different description of that earning on the pay stub. So I'm going to click New to create a new earning, and I'm going to call it Office Hourly. Now the abbreviation is 10 characters or less, and it needs to be unique among all earnings. And you want to be as descriptive as possible in those 10 characters because it might be the abbreviation that shows up on their pay stub. Then we're going to give it a name. After that, we need to choose a type of earning. Now, most of your earnings are going to be the type of regular pay. However, there are several other types. When you're setting up earnings, if you're going to be calculating any kind of overtime, you do need to have an overtime earning. So it's either going to be a manual overtime or a calculated overtime. And we have different videos on each of those that'll give you a better idea of which type of overtime you want to select. However, if you do select manual overtime, you'll also wind up selecting a method of hourly. And down at the bottom left of the screen, we'll have 3 boxes. Now, likely you're never going to put anything in a rate box at the bottom left-hand corner of any of the earnings. If you do put something in the rate box, all it does is it creates a default so that when you create a new employee, it'll default that in. Since most of my employees are making a different rate of pay, I don't want to default there. But what I will want for this overtime earning, this manual overtime earning, is to put in the multiplier for the overtime. So if I put in 1.5, that means that I'm paying them time and a half for their overtime. Okay. If I were to choose calculated overtime, it puts a little bit different information at the bottom of the screen. With calculated overtime, you can determine whether or not you're paying overtime on a daily basis or some periodic period, such as like 1 week, for example, or both. If it's something like 1 week, like a periodic overtime, you could choose the number of days in that period, the date that it's starting, and then you can tell us how overtime is calculated. If it's calculated over 40 hours, what is the rate over 40 hours? 1.5. And then if I have another level of overtime, like let's say if they work more than 60 hours in a week, maybe we pay them double time. So you can have multiple rates for different levels of overtime using this method. Again, I would encourage you to watch those videos on overtime. Another type of, or another method or type of pay that you might have an earning for is a payroll advance. You can pay payroll advances out of payroll. And if you do, you're going to usually do that with a method of a fixed rate. And under the expense account is the information that is going to be a little bit different for this type of earning. Usually when you're setting up an earning, you're going to put it to an expense account, but something like a payroll advance, you might want to go to an asset. So it does allow you to select, so notice this one is an asset. It will allow me to select that account, but when I tab off of that field, it's going to warn me that it's not the typical type. So I can still say yes and override that warning, but it is going to give you that warning. Another type of earning that you might have is third-party sick pay that is paid by somebody else. Now, we don't want this earning usually to calculate any additional pay, and so it won't, but it will record the pay for government reports, and it'll also allow us to have it calculate any of the employer's share of that tax as well. You will need paid leave earnings if you are using CenterPoint to keep track of the number of hours of leave that an employee has accumulated. You'll need a paid leave earning to record the number of hours of that leave that they take in a pay period. Okay, you'll probably want to have a paid leave earning for every type of leave that you have. So for example, if I have both vacation and sick time, then I want 2 different paid leave earnings. The paid leave earnings will usually be the method of hourly. And for salary people, their rate of pay would just be 0. For the hourly people, their rate of pay would be their regular rate of pay. You have a type of earning for tips, allowing us to record tips on an employee's paycheck. And you'll choose the right IRS method for calculating those tips. And it allows you to record tips that are that an employee already received, or it'll also allow you to include them in their net pay. So if you do need to include them in their net pay, then you need to check this box and then select the liability account that those are going to be coming out of. Other types of pay that you might have are other taxable and other non-taxable. An example of an other non-taxable might be a reimbursement of some sort that would, can be paid on their paycheck as well. After you select your type, and so I'm going to select the type of regular pay, you're going to need to select your method. So if it is a salary method, there is a place for you to select what kind of schedule or what kind of salary wage rate you're going to be giving us. So you're going to be telling us what their annual salary is, what their weekly salary is, what their biweekly salary is. If you do choose something like annual, we're still going to take that annual salary and we're going to divide it by the number of pay periods to calculate what their pay per pay period should be. Again, there's always that place for a default rate, but again, that default rate is only good for creating a new employee. It defaults it into their record. So if it's not going to be the same for each employee, then it's probably best to leave it at 0. For certain earnings, you might want to require that hours be tracked. For example, if you have salary employees, but you also need to track the number of hours for workers' compensation for that employee, then you can do that at any time. But if you want to require it so that you can't enter in the earning without those hours, you can check this box. And that might be available on more than one type of earning or more than one method of earning. The next method is an hourly method. Okay, if it is hourly, you can put in the rate of pay here, but again, it's just creating a default for any new employees that you might create. If it is a piece rate type of earning, a piece rate type of earning is where you're paying the employee per something, per mile, per student, per bushel that they pick. So you're paying them per something. So you're going to tell us what the unit of measure is that you're paying per. Are you paying per student? Are you paying per unit? Do you need to create another unit of measure? Okay, so you could click new to create another unit of measure, but you're going to select the unit of measure that they're getting paid for. And again, you probably aren't going to set up a default rate unless it is going to be the same for every new employee that you create. And again, you can require that hours be tracked on that. You can always record the number of hours, but if you want to require it, you can check that box. And then, of course, there is an option for a fixed rate or earning. You might use this earning for something like a pay advance or for commissions or for a bonus that's being paid. Usually you're not going to have a base rate of pay for that because it's usually going to be different each time. And again, if you want to require the number of hours be tracked for it, you can select that option. We're going to choose hourly for the one that we're creating. After that, you're going to need to select a schedule. Now, the default schedule for all earnings for CenterPoint is that they'll be calculated on every pay period. So this is going to be the default schedule. And even if it's blank, it's going to be using that schedule. If you want to select a schedule and make it be a default, you can select it and then right-click and set it as the default. And that'll be the default for every new one that you create unless you change it. Okay, you can also add additional schedules. So, for example, if I have an earning that should only be calculated on the first pay period of the month, I'm going to need a schedule for that. And so I would select the schedule for only first pay period. However, if it doesn't exist already, I could click new to create that schedule. After that, you're going to select your expense account. Again, most earnings will go to an expense account, but you can choose an account of any type in that box. If you have work shifts where you pay a premium if the employee works a particular shift, you can set up those work shifts and then tell the system whether or not this earning is one of the earnings that is going to get that shift premium. Is it going to be applied to work shifts? If it is, you'll check that box. When we pay employees a piece rate, we also need to record the number of hours that they worked. And so that we can, for a lot of piece rate earnings, calculate that they're being paid at least minimum wage. Okay, so the number of hours versus the number of pieces that they work needs to at least equal minimum wage. Okay, so but that employee might also make other earnings, like they may make an hourly wage of some sort. So if there is additional wages that should be included in the minimum wage calculation, they will be checked. Okay, so you'll want to check them. If that minimum wage calculation needs to include the adverse effect wage rates, then you'll also check the box for adverse effect wage rates. Now we're going to go to the Taxes tab. On the Taxes tab, you're going to see all of the taxes that you've set up in CenterPoint, and it would include any workers' compensation rates if you'd set those up. I haven't set any of those up in my database, so they're not on here. For the default for every earning you create is that all the taxes would be calculated for that earning. Now, if that tax hasn't been added to an employee, of course, it's not going to be calculated for that employee. Some earnings, though, you want to exclude the taxes from. So, for example, a payroll advance, you would not want to calculate taxes on that earning, okay, or a reimbursement. Okay, if a earning is subject to the tax, but that you're not withholding it from the employee, you're going to check this box for that particular tax. If a tax should only calculate the employer's share, such as a third-party sick pay, if we only want to calculate the employer's share, we're going to check the box to calculate just the employer's share. Now, every tax has some sort of tax table built into the system, but if you want to ignore the tax table and enter in a flat rate to use instead, that flat rate would go into the flat percentage rate column. After you've made your selections for taxes, we can move on to the Deductions and Benefits tab. Now, if you haven't set up your deductions and benefits yet, you'll need to do that first, obviously. I have a list of deductions and benefits that are already set up. So what I want to tell the system is which deductions and benefits should be calculated for this earning. So it's only going to calculate for an employee those deductions and benefits that are assigned to the employee. But since I might have different employees making this earning, if any of them have these deductions or benefits, I'm going to calculate it. So by them being on the left-hand side, it's going to be calculated. If I have certain deductions and benefits that I don't want to be calculated on an earning, I would move them over to the right, either by highlighting them and moving them individually, or I could move them all at one time by clicking on the arrow with the double arrows. Okay, this one I do want to calculate all of those deductions and benefits for, but we can determine that on a earning by earning basis. When you're done making all of your selections, you're going to click Save. It's going to ask you whether or not you want to add the earning to employees. If I say no, it'll just create the earning and it won't add it to any employees, but I can add it manually. If I say yes, then it brings up a box with a list of employees, and I could add it to the employees that I need to add it to by moving them to the right-hand side and clicking Add, and then it goes and it adds it to those employees. Another way that we can add an earning to employees is we can highlight the earning. So let's say I want to add a salary earning to certain employees. I could right-click on that earning and go to Add Employees. It'll bring up that same list of employees, and I could just choose which ones I want to add that to by moving them to the right and clicking Add. And then it adds that earning to those employees.